All right, hello. Welcome back to Otis Frampton Live. As usual, we're going to check that audio, make sure the audio is good. Got to have good audio. It's very important. And while I do that, let me tell you that, looks like the audio is good. Sorry, there's always a delay. So I'm always waiting for the audio, for the video that I'm listening to catch up. But the last thing I want to do is start a stream with bad audio. All right, so today is a Makin and Talkin comics episode. Do those every Monday and Friday currently, 1 p.m. Central, here on Rumble and YouTube. And if you watched before, you know that consists of about 45 minutes of working on whatever's on my plate comic-wise. Today it's a page of Patchwork Girl of Oz. And then talking about a comic, usually a single issue, that means a lot to me and influenced me and taking you through that comic and showing you what I like about it and what I like about the storytelling. And so I'm just going to get going here. Right now I'm working on this page here, kind of finishing up doing the last layer of pencils. And this one doesn't really need too much, so I might jump into the inks. Yeah, it's actually, I don't know why I'm just gonna do all that. Jump right into the line art here, the inks. I already started it, sort of. I laid down a few lines on one character here. I don't know why I did that. Sometimes I like to do that and jump in, but I think I'm just going to jump in here. It's going to be kind of neat having all these episodes of Making and Talking comics, and really having a lot of my production, well, not a lot, but some of Patrick Girl of Oz on video. I don't have that for other comics because I wasn't live streaming. But if I ever wanted to put together some sort of video documentary or something, all I have to do is download the live streams and pull video from that. So that's cool. If you are watching live and you're in the chat room, please feel free to chat with me. I am, as always, monitoring the chat. Monitor on both Rumble and YouTube. So I'm watching, and I'm watching you as you're watching me. I'm not gonna. I don't like that. That's there. Not gonna spoil which comic I'll be talking about today, but I'll give you a hint. Maybe I'll start giving hints. So can avoid talking about it, but still talk about it. It's a series that was Marvel's first all Canadian superheroes group. If you know comics, that's an obvious hint. So it's not like I'm doing a lot of mysterious work here, but there's your hint. Oops. This is kind of a weird pose, I know, but if you, here, I'll show you. Let's see. There, I'll show you the cover pose. I'm not done with the cover here, but you can see he's got his arm lifted up here and stirring this pot. But it's such a weird pose. I wanted to kind of let viewers know what the heck is going on. I say whoops a lot when I'm live streaming. I think it's because I think it a lot, even when I'm not live streaming. It's like whoops, and so I just say it. So I'm so sort of in tune with just saying what I'm thinking while I'm doing this. So if you get bored with me saying whoops, I apologize. It's just, just the way how do I fix that? It's just what I'm thinking in the moment. I realized recently I tend to draw hair sometimes, like feathers. like I draw like each little bunch or strand. Sometimes I wish I didn't do that because I see what other artists do with sort of vaguely representing, just like that for hair. And I'm like, God, I wish I could get away with that, but it doesn't match with what I'm seeing. You know what I mean? It's like it's like I'm seeing my characters with like what they look like if if they were claymation or CG models. I don't know if that makes sense, but I tend to not see the line work as loosely as some artists can seem to get away with. I mean, get away with in the best sense. I'm envious. I think that speaks to their proficiency and my lack of proficiency. I think they're a little bit more confident. So why don't you draw more, Otis? Okay, I will. I'll try. I promise. I don't like that. So there. This kind of panel with this kind of shot, and I know some people are like, there are no shots in comics. Well, there are in mine. So that's the language I use is filmmaking language because that's the way I think. Partly because I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I was in my local community college's film program when I decided to get back into comics and started drawing again. When I was about, what, it would have been 92, so I would have been 20. So I still think in terms of cinematic language. Anyway, this kind of shot is only possible, this kind of extreme sort of close-up at a weird angle where you're only seeing parts of the character, and like character so far, this is only possible if you've already established the character. And this page, I've already spent many other panels establishing what's going on here. So the abstraction of it won't lose, the reader won't lose their sense of geography and situation. That's important in storytelling. I remember the first time I ever heard the word geography associated with storytelling. And I think about it when I speak about that is, sorry, hold on. It was a TV behind the scenes making of a special about Raiders of the Lost Ark, and they showed footage of Spielberg, and he was blocking out the scene in the marketplace when Indy and Marion are attacked by the swordsman. And he was basically blocking out the scene and thinking about where he wanted things to go and where he wanted to place people and where he wanted the camera to travel. And he kept talking about the geography of the scene and how we've got to make sure that the audience knows where they are in the scene. And I thought that really stuck with me, even though, I mean, this would have, first time I saw it, it would have been 1981, I guess. And I was 8, about 8 years old, probably. And even then, it stuck with me. It's like geography of the scene. That's so cool. That makes sense, and that really speaks to Spielberg and how well he knows visual language and storytelling. I love that. I didn't know what I'm drawing here. Look at the character. There we go. Now I'm reoriented. But yeah, I remember thinking that's so cool. And when you watch Spielberg's movies and you see how he uses the camera and moves it, and just remind yourself of what I just talked about, how you always know where you are in the scene, and he's always guiding your eye, but always keeping you oriented too. He's a masterful visual storyteller. For me, there's him, there's Hitchcock, there's Zemeckis, and I think those three are probably the most influential visual storytellers in film. Those three are great. McTiernan's really good too, especially in Die Hard. There's some of the camera placements and moves that he does in Die Hard are just fantastic when it comes to like you always knew where you are in that building because of where McTiernan is putting the camera and how he's moving it. It's really masterful. That movie is geography is so important in that movie. You don't really kind of connect with it until you think about that. And I think it's one reason why, for me, there's many reasons why the other movies don't work, the Die Hard movies. But part of what works for that movie is that it's bound to certain geography. The other movies, they're all over the place, location-wise. I mean, even though Die Hard 2 is set in an airport, you're kind of going all over the airport, whereas, the building environment is so crucial to understanding what's going on in the first Die Hard. And it's thematically good too, because he's forced to be in that space. He's confined to it. It's one reason why the first movie works so well. He can't leave that environment, whereas in the other ones, he kind of can. He's not stuck there, and it deflates the stakes for me. I think that's why they don't work. I'm just rambling now. Sorry about that, but no one's chatting with me, so I'm going to ramble on. All right, got that inked. I think I'm going to stick with character work here, so it's a little more interesting. Whoops. Oh, I was wrong on the wrong layer there. Just make sure that I didn't screw anything up. No, I didn't ink over any pencil, so we're good. I just need to cut this away. Cut and paste. Bring that back down. There we go. All right. So now I'm going to do a little more pencil work on the final pencils. Hello, Reformed Movie Geek on YouTube. I feel like what I've been chatting about here is kind of right up your alley based on your name. So, there we go. I already started penciling Margalot here and inking, but I'm going to tighten up the pencils on some of these characters here in this second panel, and then I'll probably start inking again. All my comic characters tend to sort of adhere to the cartoony rule of they only wear one outfit for the most part. For the most part, they're always in the sort of the same outfit, no matter how much time has passed, and that's the case here. These 3 panels are a flashback, and the only distinction I think I'm going to do to change it is in the current time, she's got like this streak of gray in her hair, but I don't think I'm going to do that here, just to give a subtle hint. that it's a different time. It's going to be just a little bit different. But I think that shows my comic strip influence. For a while in my youth, I thought I wanted to make comic strips. I even in my 20s sent out samples to syndicates and got some responses back for the strip that I was making. One was really positive. I actually got to talk to an editor on the phone for it, but it didn't happen. Maybe someday I'll show those comic strips. I still have some of them. I quickly learned, though, that I wasn't as much as I loved the comic strip medium, and my main influence was like Bloom County. I loved Bloom County growing up. I wore Opus shirts all the time, and not because my name is Otis. I promise. It's just one of those things. But I had so many Opus shirts. But I also loved Calvin and Hobbes, the Far Side. I'm trying to think of what else. That was really the biggest influences. Bloom County is still an influence in some ways. I mean, if you look at the way I draw certain characters' hair and go look at like Milo from, not Milo, what's his name? Binkley? I forget the kid's name who had the father in the strip. I forget. But it's definitely you can see like a Berkeley Breathed influence on the hair that still applies to me today. Here I'm drawing the glass cat before she comes to life. So I'm drawing her a little, I want her to be a little bit more angular because she's supposed to be like a statue. Oops. Let's see. Reform Movie Geek on YouTube asks, what was the premise of the comic strip submissions? It was very Bloom County-ish. Sort of, I called it Jupiter Blues, and it was. I made it really generic that it was set in a town called Jupiter Blues, Florida, and it centered around, it basically was writing about my life at the time, and it centered around two two 20-something guys who were roommates, but it also moved around to other characters. But it was mostly about them. There were no like fanciful. That's the biggest I've ever drawn her hair. I gotta scale that back a little bit. There weren't like animal characters or anything, but there was plenty of they had a vivid fantasy life. Let's put it that way. So they would imagine themselves in different scenarios. It kind of was more of like a Gen X. It was kind of a Gen X version of what Penny Arcade was. But this was, many years before Penny Arcade came out, so I wasn't like copying them or anything. And I remember thinking that when I first encountered Penny Arcade, it kind of reminds me of mine. But kind of like that. And I moved around. It was very much like the early years of Bloom County, rather than the later years where Berkeley Brother got kind of like experimental and almost like abstract in the way he did things. But before he went full on sort of weird with what was called Outland. That was the name of the strip that he did. It's the strip that Bloom County basically morphed into. He said he said he quit doing Bloom County, but really what he did was he just sort of accepted that he had moved into a different area of interest as a cartoonist, I think, and said, well, I'm not going to alienate my longtime Bloom County fans anymore. And he just kind of leaned into the absurdist nature of what he had started doing. But it was cool. Outland was cool. But I was a big Bloom County fan. I liked I liked when Bloom County was like Doonesbury for kids. You know what I mean? Because Doonesbury was what was one of his primary influences, but he clearly wasn't doing something as political as Doonesbury. He touched on it once in a while, enough that, but in ways that even a kid like me reading it could understand it, and it was kind of goofy and lighthearted, and with a character like Opus, he could treat things a little bit more innocently, and I appreciated that. But I don't know what happened to the strips. I remember working like, I don't know if you can see my hands in this shot. Here's my hands. I guess you can't see how long, but I worked at the exact size that comic strip artists worked. I researched it, with my limited ways of researching back in, I guess it would have been 94. Yeah, I took a little break from trying to get into comics and trying to break into comic strips. Yeah, I was an unfocused weirdo for a while there. But I worked full size. I used which was probably 17 inches by like 5 or 6. I mean, they were big. I remember researching how comic strip artists worked, like hunting down interviews with Berkeley Breathed, and worked in the same way. And but I don't know what happened to those originals. I have some of them. I have some like photocopies from the samples that I sent out to different what are they called? Syndicates, the different comic strip syndicates. I have some of them somewhere. I just don't know where they are. They're in a box somewhere collecting dust. And I'm not sure if I want to embarrass myself by, do they have 4 buttons, or I guess, I don't know. I got to learn how to draw my own characters. We'll give them 3. But I remember it taught me a lot about my own skill level and how much work goes into making a comic strip, because you got to have content every day. Every day, it's a I really respect those guys who do that and did that and made it happen. You know, because I remember thinking, I can't. This isn't for me. I'm not the guy who comes up with the daily joke, or the daily gag, or and it's just not the kind of storytelling that I wanted to do ultimately, I think. I'm definitely much more of a, long form storyteller. Reform Movie Geek says would be cool to see those someday. You know what? Maybe I'll look for them. It'd be really embarrassing, I think, to show them. It's trying to figure out where I think I want to draw this longer. There were a couple that I remember thinking that they looked okay, and that was partly because of what I was drawing. I think that some of the more fantasy based, the ones where I kind of leaned into giving the characters a healthy fantasy life. I remember one sequence where one of the characters was working at a fast food restaurant called Burger Shack, and he was imagining himself as a captain of the Enterprise and being assimilated by the mindless drones of the fast food place he worked. So some of it was fun. I think my dad ended up having some of the strips because I was so poor at one point that I could not afford like Christmas gifts, so I was giving like framed copies of original artwork to my dad. God, that's embarrassing now, but you do what you do when you're a poor guy. You do what you got to do. I mean to say. I don't like how that's looking. But maybe I'll look for him and see if I can not be too embarrassed to show them. The one thing that was very different about how I worked on those. What time is it? I got some time. Was again, I was working in like full size on these strips, and I was using a nib pen and like India ink and Zipatone. You had to cut out the dots to create gray tone, and that's something that I don't do now. I did it for a while for some comic stuff because I thought maybe that I would get into like indie comics, and that was a big thing to use for indie comics at the time. Boy, it was so time consuming. It's all I did for a while was ink comic strips. And it was very frustrating. That's just not for me. That's one reason why when digital finally came along, when the first time I got my Wacom tablet, I was like, this is it. This is how I want to work. I don't want to work on paper anymore. I just completely got into the digital. All right, let's see what's going on. Reform Movie Geek says, I've done comic strips and comic books on and off for 20 years plus. Feels like trying to launch a comic strip webcomic today feels like an ice skating uphill. No judgment, you're amongst friends. Totally understand. No, you're right. There was a brief time I think when like in the like from say 1999 to 2000, let's say 8 or 9, where web comics, comic strips had sort of this, heyday, and it felt like the comic strip medium was sort of being saved by the web. But it really, yeah, you're right. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that, social media has changed things. And if you're going to do anything like, am I in the right layer? Yes, I am. Anything like material that would have gone into a comic strip back in the day, you're probably doing it in different ways. You're getting the same kind of storytelling or art in different ways. Trying to think of an example, but I can't. But like you're looking to go viral with a quick thing, quick video or something like that, as opposed to characters that you would encounter every day in the paper as you're drinking your morning coffee. Because that's really, that was the environment where comic strips, they lived and breathed and flowered and became something that people expected to see. They were newspapers. That was a delivery system, and that's just not there anymore. So I think Penny Arcade and PvP, and I'm sure there are others that were huge that I'm missing out on mentioning, but like those comic strips, those comic strip format daily comics on the web might have been the last hurrah for that medium. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something going on right now, but I just can't think of it. I'm not that tied into it anymore in terms of being a reader or a fan. Reform Movie Geeks asks, how often do you double tap paper? All the time. All the time. All the time. Yep. It's so ingrained in my work process now. And I'm not alone. Many Procreate artists are plagued by the double tap on paper when they go back to touching paper, which I don't do often, but I'm always double tapping, and it's embarrassing, but it is what it is, No, I'm a creature of digital. I knew the first time I got a little Wacom Tablin set up in front of my screen back in 1999. I knew the first time I used it, I'm like, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for, even though I didn't know I was waiting for it. And I'm still a creature of digital, despite having grown up in the analog world. I always say I always hated drawing on paper. It psyched me out. It still does. The permanence of it. One of my favorite things about digital is that it doesn't feel permanent at all. I can always, undo or do what I just did there. Although I lost some of the sharpness there. Deleting layers it feels much easier and comfortable to me than erasing, because just the idea that you're sort of ruining the paper a little bit every time you erase, it psyched me out. I hated that. I still do. I still hate it. That's one reason why when I do anything on paper these days, it's always sketched first in Procreate, printed out to blue line, and then inked over. And it's usually really tight digital pencils that I'm making over, because it just psychs me out. It's something that I've always dealt with my whole life. Now, there are things that I'm still not full. Like some people will use the stabilizing tools for brushes when they work digitally, and I think that's a huge mistake. I think using any form of stabilization to your lines is a bad habit. It teaches you really bad habits, and it's basically giving up part of your style to the computer. So I forget who it was, but somebody who was watching me once was shocked by how there was no stabilization on my inking pen, and it's like, well, that's because I could never give that part of myself up to the computer. And also, when I do go back to drawing on paper, if I depended on stabilization to form my line weights, I wouldn't have that muscle memory to be able to do it on paper when it mattered. So that's why. Before Movie Geek says, never had a Wacom, but I started with an Intuos 4 tablet. Oh, that is a Wacom. Wacom makes Intuos tablets. Eventually got a Nova 19, but once got an iPad with Procreate. That was it. Totally agree. Most I like doing most I like to do on paper is sketch cards. Before Movie Geek says, that was me who asked about stabilization. Sorry about that. Sorry to repeat myself there. Yeah, it's just something I don't do. Whoops. Honestly, I'm actually surprised that I know they got to cater to all types, but kind of surprised that Procreate even has stabilization in their tool set, because there's so much about the artist that it almost feels like they would kind of say, we're not going to put stabilization in because you're going to have to learn how to do this yourself. But they didn't, and I get that. Oh, looks like it's almost time to it is time, actually. Wow, time flies. All right. You know what I'm going to do real quick? No, that's fine. All right. So that's all for today for the comic making part. And I'm going to move this. And let's see what we're at. Make sure the camera's in focus. So today's comic that I'm going to talk about, I gave you the hint earlier, Marvel's first all-Canadian superhero group. Of course, I'm talking about Alpha Flight. Let's make sure that focus is good. Looks like it's good. Okay. I'm going to talk about 3 specific issues, issue 1, issue 12, and issue 25. They're all about 12 issues apart. That's interesting. First, I'm going to talk about issue 1. And, oh, that's weird. I usually don't tape up my comics in the front. Somebody else must have done that. Issue 1, Alpha Flight number 1. This is a special comic to me for many reasons. First of all, it's John Byrne. He created Alpha Flight in the pages of X-Men originally. And then was asked by Jim Shooter to turn it into his own comic. But this comic, look at these awesome ads. This comic was on the stands the first day I walked into a comic shop for the first time. It was this little dingy store called The Bookshop down on a street named Broadway that didn't really feel like anything like Broadway, trust me, in the town I grew up in. And it was originally a store that sold used paperbacks, for like 10 cents to a quarter or something like that. And so you walk into this place, and it's this dingy little place that's kind of separated by two areas, right and left, when you walk in. And on the right were stacks and shelves full of paperbacks. On the left was comics, and the comics were all mostly new. And they had long boxes of comics for like 25 cents each. I remember I got a bunch of Incredible Hulk issues there for 25 cents each. Anyway, first day I walked into a comic shop, a proper comic shop, after picking up Uncanny X-Men 174. It was the week this came out. And there's something special about when you're a comic fan and you connect with a series that is brand new to comics, just like you are. You know what I mean? It's special in a way in that it's new, you're new to the medium, and your interest and fandom grows with it as the series grows. And that was the case with me and Alpha Flight. I didn't know anything about it. I had no idea its connection to X-Men until years later, actually. Well, not years, maybe a year later. But I loved it. They felt like totally new characters that I could kind of call my own. I just love this comic. And it happened to be John Byrne, who ended up becoming my favorite comic artist for a very long time. Very long time. So, that said, there's Alpha Flight number 1. Put it back in its bag and board. 12 issues into Alpha Flight, this issue came along. I remember exactly what I was doing the day I picked this one up. I was coming home from confirmation classes. My mother tried to get me to confirm as a Catholic. Didn't take, sorry, Mom. But I remember after confirmation class, I went to the comic shop, and this was on the shelf. And this issue, double size, 12 issue. Look at that cover. This cover has been homaged so many times over the years, since 1984, I guess it says. 84. That makes sense. Yeah. Publishing July 84. This cover's been homaged by comic artists so many times over the years. It's iconic. And even then, when I saw this cover, I knew that it was going to be special. And it was, because you might want to turn away right now, because I'm going to talk spoilers about this issue. Just so I can talk about the next issue I want to talk about. This was the culmination of a year's worth of stories that John Byrne was telling, leading up to the death of a main character. I mean, it says right here on the cover, and one shall surely die. And John Byrne, he wasn't lying, man. He meant it, and it happened to be the main character, North Star. No, Guardian. I'm sorry, North Star's the other one. Guardian, right? It's been a while since I read Alpha Flight. And he has this huge fight with this other character, and look at this panel. The way that he drew the interior of the costume, showing its guts and how it really was sort of like an Iron Man suit almost, and then how beat up he is. You rarely see a comic character like that. It's really amazing to see even now. And then you see his thought process, where he knows his suit's going critical, going to explode. And you get this amazing page with the 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, the panel borders as a countdown, and the close-ups, and him working against time to save himself. And then, of course, wow, this page had a huge impact on me as a kid, reading comics, seeing the main character in one of my favorite series die. It's devastating. Last page panel. John, this and the last page of I think it's, I forget the number of it, but a Fantastic Four issue where something tragic happened. John Byrne knows how to end an issue on tragedy in an amazing way. And from an artistic point of view, look at the sort of cross hatching he does here to indicate the fire and the parts of the remain. It's a really beautiful page, and it's a beautiful sequence. His wife coming in and seeing him right before he dies. A special comic, which leads me to outside real quick. Alpha Flight 25. Oh boy, John Byrne still making the comic. He had some epic runs in comics, and he was doing Fantastic Four at the same time. So he was doing two of my favorite comics at the same time. This publication date was August '85. He wasn't inking at this point. Bob Wyakek was, is that how you pronounce it? Wyakek was inking, but he was still doing the story in pencils. And this issue also hit me in a big way because, Guardian had been dead for a while now. And all of a sudden, there he is. He shows up, and everyone's like, what is happening? Who is this? And again, I'm going to talk some spoilers. So back out now if you don't want to see this. But here, a new character on the team is recounting her memories of having been told what happened and how it's impossible because he's dead, isn't he? Well, and then we get to this point. I love how Byrne gets all this exposition across during a comic book battle scene. It's pretty great. So, and then it's unfortunate this couldn't have been a page turn reveal kind of thing, but it is what it is. It might have been in his mind. He might have been deterred by the use of commercials or advertisements. Anyway, so Guardian and his widow are reunited, and this is where we get into what is one of my favorite moments in comics, favorite stories in comics, where James Hudson, Guardian, apparently recounts how he could have possibly survived the explosion, despite having seen like some of the remains. It doesn't make sense, but man, John Byrne, he is so good. He tells the story of how Guardian, he at the last minute changed something so that he was sent through a rift in time from the explosion. It turns out he ended up on which one is it? It's Ganymede, one of the moons of Jupiter. He ended up there almost dead, but then he was saved by the inhabitants of the moon. They were an underwater alien species, and they put him back together. And then they put him in like suspended animation, and he lived through the centuries in suspended animation, so he could get back to the exact time and then take his ship back to Earth. It's so absurd, but it's so creative and fun and comic booky, and I just love it. And then of course, after all of those revelations, there was a moment in a previous issue where she thought she saw him in a crowd, and they call back to that. And then there's a final revelation that the aliens didn't know what was his suit and what was him, and put him back together in a certain way. But he was now part machine. So I love this issue so much. I love the story. I'm a big fan of Arthur C. Clarke's Odyssey series, 2001, 2061, or 2010, 2061, and then 2001. So Jupiter's kind of has a special place in my heart from stories too. So I loved the use of Jupiter. Maybe he did too. Maybe that's where he got it from. But it's just such a great series. And if you just read it from issue 1 to 12 to say issue 30, around where John Byrne gave up the reins and left the series, it's a really great sort of single story arc for the characters. And that's one of the things I love about comics is you find those a lot. You'll find, if an artist and writer does a long run on something, you can almost read a giant chunk of a long series as its own story arc. And that's how I think of Alpha Flight. It's a great sort of single story that you can keep reading or not, whatever. But so that's Alpha Flight for me. That's Alpha Flight. That's my comic of the day that I wanted to talk about. And
boy, it makes me want to read this right now. They recently released the Alpha Flight Omnibus. It's like in hardcover form. It's this thick book, but I got it on Comixology, and I haven't read it yet. But it might be time to reread Alpha Flight because this was one of the first comics I saw in the comic shop. First time I went to the comic shop. Very special to me. Thank you all for watching and listening to me ramble on about Alpha Flight and things from, 40 years ago? 41 years ago. Oh my goodness. Wow. Crazy. I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. to work on, I think I got a commission to work on, or it might be done with the commission. I think tomorrow the scheduled to work on solo. I could be wrong. Anyway, tomorrow 1 p.m. Central, I'll be working on more of my commission work, and I hope to see you then. You guys, please like, share, follow, all that good stuff on Rumble and YouTube, and I'll see you later. Take care.